lot of handing mics around, and we don't want to go. Diane and I don't want to put in too many steps today. Okay, here's what's going to happen today. I'm going to say just a couple words of introducing the book. And after that, I'm not going to talk very much. You all are going to do the talking. Kathy's queued up a clip of Desmond Tutu that's just a few minutes long that we will watch after I do my introduction. And then the rest is up to you. And this particular book, like many that we've read, well, unlike some that we read, let me start that over. Like many that we read it in our monthly book group, and everybody in the book group decided this would be a good one for a full church read. Unlike a lot of books, it's one that what was interesting was how different people's reactions were to the same. We all read the same book, but it hit people different ways depending on their own journey with forgiveness. And so our goal today is just to hear from as many of you as we can about what your reactions to the book were and to see if we can learn from what other people got out of it. The other thing I'll say by way of introduction is before I read this book and I was trying to get a sense of what it was, I was looking on different sites to see what people said about it. And there was one site where had a whole lot of reviews, and you could click on, and it was like, 98% of the people gave it high marks. And then, but of course, there's always a few negative reviews on anything. So I said, well, show me the negative reviews, because you can learn a lot about a book like that. And the first one I read said, if the subject is forgiveness, the answer is Jesus, end of story. And the second one read, as soon as they said something about God, I stopped reading. I don't want to read anything with religion in it. So there you go. There's a couple of extreme reasons to not like the book, is that it doesn't talk about Jesus enough, or that it does. So with that, let's cue up the clip, and then we'll hear some of your reactions.
Even in the worst of situations, some people are able to find it in their hearts to forgive, while others can't understand how or why. Archbishop Desmond Tutu of South Africa, who knows a lot about the subject, says there's a lot of power in forgiveness. He discussed it with NBC's Ann Curry.
In South Africa, Archbishop Desmond Tutu is talking about forgiveness in one of Cape Town's poorest neighborhoods.
I'm sad more than angry.
Blacks here were forced to live in townships under the racial oppression of apartheid for decades. Some still do.
Unfortunately, South Africa has become the country in which the gap between the rich and the poor is the widest in the world.
It was Archbishop Tutu who chaired the nation's Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which saw 19,000 mostly black men, women, and children testify about the brutal atrocities they had endured: murder, torture, and rape. And yet many forgave their white oppressors. In the face of that evil, how do you explain so many South Africans saying, okay, I forgive?
It's one of those incredible things about human beings. No one is beyond redemption. No one.
Now Tutu has written a book on the power of forgiveness with his daughter Impo, which includes some extraordinary stories of forgiveness, not just in South Africa, but all over the world. You write about a couple in California, the Wagners.
Yes.
Who not only forgave the drunk driver who killed
Their
their two daughters,
Two daughters, yeah.
they embraced her.
Yes.
Does
yes.
it take an extraordinary person, though, to do something like that?
You know, yes, it takes an extraordinary person to do something like that, and yet we all have the capacity to be extraordinary.
Almost all of us will say, I wouldn't be able to do that when we hear of the circumstances. But you don't know. You know, you don't know how you really would react.
In fact, they say the capacity to forgive is in each one of us, and it is something you actually do for yourself.
It's your peace of mind, your peace of spirit that you serve by forgiving. The person who has done the evil deed will have consequences. But until you are able to forgive them, you're still tied to them. You continue to be punished by what they have done.
So forgiving someone does not mean absolving them from justice.
No.
Forgiving does not mean forgetting.
No.
The Archbishop says forgiveness has given his nation, and so its future, new freedom to hope.
We all get to the point where we realize human life would be totally impossible. Yes, without that forgiveness. You want to be a pilot? That's wonderful. That's really aiming high.
A gift he helped give South Africa, he's now offering to the world. Ann Curry, NBC News, Cape Town.
Thanks, Kathy. And now, time for your reactions. And I heard a very interesting story from Kent a while back after he read it. So I've asked him to go first, and I'm sure maybe none of you have took this path, so we'll see.
Well, thank you. The book meant a lot to me. And I get emotional, so sorry about that. But as you know, I've been dealing with a family that's had a lot of hurt and a cousin who's been incarcerated for quite a bit of time. And family members who have said that if my cousin Doug would accept Jesus, they would forgive him. Oh, if he would accept Jesus, they would forgive him, or at least they would enter into a relationship. And I wasn't thinking about any of that when the book was selected. But I read the book and I thought, one of the things I saw was, start right now. Forgive now, and there's a path for it. Because we all need paths. Some of us need structure. We just can't organize ourselves to get it. And so a fourfold path seemed pretty straightforward and easy. Or maybe not easy. But as I was reading it, I saw the parts of it that said, talk to people who weren't ready to forgive or had rules on how forgiveness should be or how forgiveness shouldn't be provided. And so I went to my aunt and I got her a book, and I said to my aunt, your sons, I think, would really benefit from reading this, and reading it not in the context to each other, but just to read it and take from it how they might make the next steps. So it's not over, but it's a start. And so it was wonderful to have the book, and I've suggested it to many other people. And I think that many are finding that they're getting something out of it. So thanks.
Thank you. Who else had a reaction to the book?
After reading the book, what happened to me seems kind of trite, but it hit me deeply. I was living in Mexico. I had a neighbor who was from the U.S. who moved in with his family. This neighbor claimed to be a Christian. He started to stalk me after my husband died, told me that it was no wonder he died because I was no good. He ended up killing my dogs. He killed the dog across the street that I had been helping take care of. And I moved back here about a few months after all this happened, after my kids said, get out of there and get home. I heard since that he had killed several other dogs in the area. And I know it sounds really, like I said, trite. When you think about what the people of South Africa went through, when you think about the people here that are being snatched off the street and separated from their families. But I have a very, very hard time saying that I can forgive this man. I have let it go, as I have to, but I still think about it, and I think, after reading the book, I really had a hard time thinking of forgiveness to this person. So I don't know what more to say.
Thank you. Who else?
I wasn't going to say anything, but it's so in my mind, and I felt the same as you after reading the book, that I'm having a very, very difficult time reconciling the way our country is going and with the leader. And I don't know how I forgive the leader who's perpetuating these terrible things that are happening. And, I know there's some goodness somewhere in him, but I can't find him, and I don't know what the answer is.
I haven't read the book, but I have been angry, and you just mentioned what has been bothering me, to put it mildly, for at least a year or longer. And I'm the one that gets text messages every day, though, about people who are bringing up laws that can take care of some of the things that this president has done. But what I've started to do, and I'm not sure what caused me to do it, is I've started to pray for him. And praying that somehow, I don't have no idea how to express it, but somehow that he is healed, or he can be saved from himself. I don't know the right words. I've just had the thoughts. And because I've been livid, and this is unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And I was wondering, how can it keep happening? How are we letting him get away with all of this? And that was my whole agony, kept blistering up. And then just a few days ago, all of a sudden, I realized I have to pray for him. And I've been praying that somehow he will be touched, or somehow, and it may just mean certainly hoping that he's taken out of his position. So anyway, that's what I've been experiencing. I've not read the book yet, and it won't hurt me to read it, that's for sure.
Madeline?
So I read it 3 times. And the first time was the thing I forgave was people I'm no longer in contact with. So that ability to learn, and the book goes over it, that how do you forgive somebody that you don't have a conversation with? And what does that mean for you and how you're interacting with the world, even though that person, it doesn't change your day-to-day because you're not interacting with them. And I found a lot of light in that, ease of some of those pains. The second time through, I, though, tried with family stresses, people you have to interact with, and that realization of how do you have these conversations, or even forgive when those conversations still aren't possible with people you love. Because that's difficult, and the book outlines really well kind of some of those ways that you do that. You still have conversations, just maybe not with the person that had those interactions, but also it's not meant to, trudge up or cause strife within the larger group. And then the third one, which is why I'm talking here, is that I definitely have a chip on my shoulder that with family members who are of different political leanings than I do, and how they influence and interact with the family at large. And how do I then forgive them or have that interaction with them? Because I do love them and I want to interact with them, but I struggle in my interactions with them because I hold this grudge that they don't see as a problem. And for me, that was one of the big ones, the hard ongoing one, is how do you internalize and make sure that you're not harming yourself or others when you see somebody else doing harm, which I'll continue looking at moving forward.
I just want to say something real quick. When I read this and started reading it and found out that there was basically homework at the end of every chapter, I thought, oh gosh, what have I signed up for? But it was the best thing, doing all of those things. I actually did them. I made myself a journal. I did all the things I was supposed to. I got the rock. I did all the stuff, and it made such a difference in my life. Holding that rock in my non-dominant hand for 6 or 8 hours or whatever the ridiculous amount of time was, and doing all the things that I'm supposed to do during that time was so telling. And of course, that was supposed to be the symbol of that non-forgiving that we carry around with us. It was so powerful to me, and it made a huge difference in my life.
Well, okay, that reminds me, I have to tell a story now, because what that rock thing reminded me of was something I was a part of at a Presbyterian meeting many years ago when we were still debating whether openly gay people could be ordained. And it was coming down to a key vote, and I and a guy who was kind of on the other side of it, an evangelical pastor, who were sort of friends from summer conference, were asked to lead that discussion. And we came up with this thing where everybody, when they were walking into the sanctuary where that vote was going to happen, was given a rock, a pebble to hold while we had the debate. And then we talked about how there's a lot of different things you can do with a rock. You can throw it at someone you perceive as your enemy, or you can hold on to it and see what it has to teach you. And I don't remember what all we said, but we did this whole vote with people holding a rock in their hand. And we read the passage in the Gospels for it on Palm Sunday, where Jesus says, if these people don't do what they're doing, the rocks will start crying out. I mean, that was anyway. That was my experience with a rock. Who else?
I just wanted to talk about an example that I have. I've had the opportunity of meeting with some people that represent what's called Open Hearts, Open Minds. It's an organization in our Portland area that works with prisoners in the prison system, and they take theater. This is one of their operations that they do, and they go into the prisons, and they actually produced a movie about their experience, which was Shakespeare in prison at the men's prison in Oregon. And they showed how individuals that had skills in this world of theater entered in agreements with gentlemen who had been criminals, and I don't know what crimes they had done, but they were very effective in trying to have people speak about their experiences and how they began, in some ways, to become more whole. Well, I live in a retirement community where we have almost 350 people I can draw on. I put on a program with this group and where they showed the movie and so on. And I asked the group, how many of you have had interrelationships with some criminal justice system in some way, particularly the prisons? And I swear, I was just blown away when 45% of the people raised their hands. And I'm not sure if I asked that same question today, whether or not you would share, but I thought this was a perfect example of people actively working together on the whole thought, not of forgiveness per se, but in sort of making life whole again for people. And it takes forgiveness to realize how that can happen. And we began to realize how wonderful these prisoners were. They were real people that had real interests, and they had concerns, and they shared all of their shortcomings and problems. They never tried to say, well, I didn't do it, which we hear on television. And so when I read the book, Tutu, I began to realize it's a process. It's really a process, and Open Minds, Open Hearts is really a big process of trying to bring people together to have a real sense of their human kindness and their place in society. And there is great healing in that process. So I was real happy that that's okay. I would certainly urge that you bring them here. They're great people.
Well, I know a man who founded that program. It may be this is a parallel one because it's been very effective. And I think one of the chief things is to see those men as individuals, and they held them to the same commitments as ordinary theater people putting on plays. You learn to trust your partner, your scene partner, and they discover the wonder of Shakespeare, whose knowledge of the human soul is very deep and wide. And it's very inspiring. I think it'd be a wonderful program for us to have.
I just wanted to make a comment on, in the book, Desmond Tutu does talk about how he prays for really all of the evil people. And because we all believe in the power of transformation, and there's always that belief that transformation can happen. So if we pray, we should pray for that. And that's, not necessarily praying for forgiveness for those people, but praying for the people. I just noticed that some of the summaries I thought were really powerful, that forgiveness is not weakness in the book, that it does require the courage and strength, that forgiveness is not forgetting, but requires that remembrance of hurt, which is so hard to do. And it doesn't subvert justice. It creates the space for it because it doesn't include revenge. And if we can get that conveyed to people who are just in that revenge cycle, that would be such a wonder.
Yeah, did you notice the daughter Mfo's expression when Curry said, so it doesn't mean forgetting? She's like, oh, heck no. She was like, the old phrase, forgive and forget. Forget that phrase. It's forgive and remember. And the other thing that comes through with all of that nobody's really brought forth is this book, and everybody who knows anything about truth and reconciliation knows that it starts with telling the truth. And that is, I think about that every day because we have somebody who's telling us that we can make a better country built on lies. And changing history and lying to ourselves about what's happened in the past. And that path never leads to a better place. It just doesn't. And that's part of what we're struggling with.
People have touched on this a little bit, but what struck me first was how much it affects you. Both the not being able to forgive and being able to forgive, and maybe even get a relationship going, but just how much you don't realize that it affects you and how you're tied to that person.
This is such an awkward, I wish we were sitting in a circle. It would make, I think, our sharing easier. I just think there's something about the quality of our hearts that in any of these things, I long to be wholehearted, not be holding something in reserve. But as far as forgiveness goes, if I can get my judgmental self, because I have things to confess as well. It's not, nobody's perfect. And there's a tendency to talk about the other, the person that made the mistake, that did the evil thing, and say, well, that's not me. Well, part of it is me. It's a shared humanity. And if we're going to do for our neighbor as we would like to be done to, let that doing be wholehearted and not for reasons that are self-serving. And self-serving is something I feel I'm too good at.
I was just thinking, as Jean was mentioning, we were all mentioning the difficulty of living in a Trump world, and Marie's difficulty forgiving the person who just did wrong by killing fit, defenseless animals. That the story of Trump is that this is an unloved child grown up. I've read so many stories about him, and that he has come to this earth as a disruptor so that Americans can see what could be taken away if we weren't careful, and that what is happening is people are beginning to rise up more and more things are happening, and I expect more things will be happening. But he, as an unloved child, that guy, Marie, was probably an unloved child who grew up and doesn't have any regret for anything they do because they can't go inside and say that's wrong, which is to be pitied. Imagine if you were Trump. It must be hell to be him because he doesn't even know. He's just, and he probably doesn't feel it at all. But when he gets to the other side, he's going to feel it big. His life review's going to suck. But anyway, I think it's just difficult to watch somebody do something to take away the rights of dogs to walk in Mexico or people everywhere that we're looking. And if we can't fix it, we're so helpless. And it's, what I've been hearing is just hold tight. Things are happening. Things will be happening. Keep doing good. And with me, I've realized you cannot get into political discussions with people. It's just not. It's not a positive thing to do. But what you can do is to be as kind as possible to everyone you meet because you don't know their story. And some of them are hurting so badly, which is probably why some people do awful things because they can't feel that it's awful. So anyway, too many words, but
It was just another incident of me recognizing, because my sister is a Trumper, and I love my sister. She's been my best friend throughout all the years. So it's been, and I'm sorry, my mind isn't working well these ways. My memory is not either. I'm sorry. So I sometimes forget where I was headed. But it was very clear to me how much I loved my sister. And it kind of just is what it is with her. And I pray for her too. But I also recognize how much I love her. She's been my best friend throughout life. And, certainly this whole thing about Trump, I can't let that get in the way at all. So I just had wanted to mention that too.
Well, I don't have any dramatic stories, but one of the things I found in the book that was perhaps more of a challenge than forgiving others was learning how to forgive myself and how important that is. And so I found that interesting. Don't know if anybody else that resonated, but I found it easier to let go of anger or hurt feelings than it was to forgive myself.
There was a very touching moment at a memorial service, and I'm here. It's the last big one we had. No, it's before. Anyway, it was a couple. Anyway, a young woman spoke that the person that had passed away was her grandfather, and they had had a very close relationship. And the teenage granddaughter had a lot of struggles, and she'd gotten a lot of wisdom from her grandfather, and it was very touching. And one of the things she said was I'd say, Grandpa, I screwed up this and I screwed up that. And he would say, every night I go to bed, if I can count all the major screw-ups from that day on one hand, I call it a good day. I'm going to stop here and put in a plug because I've found with these events that people kind of trickle in and then they start to trickle out. I have, last week for Welcome Back, I got printouts of our fall programs for adult ed and the book list for book group printed out. And so if you didn't get one of those last week, they're on the piano, and feel free to grab one or both on your way out. Now, back to your regularly scheduled program.
One of the activities is that you need to be able to tell the story. And I was surprised how frequently that phrasing has helped me, because it's so easy to fall into the trap of this just was a random and it doesn't fit in my life in any way. And there are events that are, unforeseen. You couldn't have done anything to prevent them. But understanding and being able to then place that in your story and then the larger story in that context has helped center me quite a bit in the larger world of these events happen. They're not ones we can control entirely, but that doesn't mean that we aren't a part of the story.
This is just a plea. I wasn't able to get hold of the book before. Are there copies now available for borrow? How's that for self-serving?
I have not read the book either, but I want to now. I had a friend. We were so close. We were closer than sisters. We clicked. And her husband died. And she formed an attachment to my partner, Art. And that led to a pretty nasty disagreement, but I understood where she was coming from and completely forgave her. And we started getting together for lunch and doing crafts and things together. And it came up again, and she told me she'd gotten rid of everything that reminded her of me and everything that reminded her of Art, and she never wanted to see me again. And I still forgive her, but I'm not willing to try and rekindle that relationship, because I don't think, and I don't know if that's right. I don't know if that's what Jesus would do. That's not 70 times 7, that's for sure. But I don't want to leave myself open to that again.
This is addressed in the book.
Is that 70 times 7?
It's addressed in the book that there are different ways of handling disagreements and forgiveness and all of the things that sometimes repairing a relationship is the right thing, and sometimes that's not the right next step. So read the book.
Anybody who we haven't heard from yet have a reaction that they want to share?
Since many of you read the book, I would be really interested if anyone has practice in how to get someone out of the cycle of just repeating the hurt. In the book, it talks about people that we see that are just talking to themselves or talking to others about the pain that they're in, but haven't advanced to another stage. And so if those who are more familiar with the book or have that I could use some feedback, not today necessarily, but at some point, just, other books you've read.
I was just going to say thank you for, I think it was you who suggested the book. It sounds like a very good one. I haven't read it yet either, but I intend to at some point. And thank you for this great discussion and the vulnerability that everybody's willing to have in these discussions.
This is not exactly common. I thought this was a really wonderful book. I was really happy that we're reading it, and I think it's really helpful. I want to mention that next week after church, we're going to have another discussion similar to this one, and it is about anti-racism. And the church, actually the Presbyterian Church USA, is asking all Presbyterian churches to develop an anti-racism policy for their church. And we're in the process of doing that. And so we're going to have I think it'll be a real interesting discussion, but when I think of anti-racism, there's a lot of issues around forgiveness that have to do with that and us white people are generally not the ones who have to forgive, although sometimes we have to forgive ourselves for the guilt that we feel in order to move on and have productive relationships. But I would say that the theme of this anti-racism policy is how we can be a really welcoming church and really honestly welcome diversity. And I think the lessons of Bishop Tutu from South Africa are relevant, and our own history, and being truthful and honest about that. So I do encourage you to keep that in mind. If you can stay after church, I would love to have as many people from our congregation here to contribute to that, and just keep the policy in your prayers and in your mind that our church can have that be a really good, productive experience.
Thank you. I had many thoughts. I had trouble with the book. I kept reading it, and I did the little design things, and I have them in a journal, which I couldn't find today or yesterday or the day before because I'm disorganized. I saw Desmond Tutu at Child Center about 20 years ago. He came to speak to something that was going on in international, and he had his little pink beanie on, and he was sitting down there, let's say as far away as the first walnut tree out here. And he spoke, and he was very enriching, and he had that beautiful smile. And I mean, I was really, really touched. So when you said it was by him, my heart just burst open. And I've read quite a bit about him. And we had a connection here at our church, which some of you guys don't remember. But there was a minister, can you guys remember, stayed with Georgia Walp? He was Episcopalian, came from South Africa. Tutu said to get out because it was a bad time. This was about 15 years ago. And he came, and he was our interim minister for about 3 months. And Georgia, and is Audrey still here? What was his name? Colin Jones. And he stayed here at the church, and we got to know his wife and his 2 kids. And then he moved on from there. He wasn't to go back yet, and he went to the Oregon Episcopal School. And he was there for a year or 2 as an interim minister. And it just broadened my ideas. Many of you know I've lived in Africa, not that part, but every time something touched me, it touched me, and I think of Tutu, and I think of him often. And I think of all the things that he came up with, and now that you guys have been expressing yourselves, I just kind of go, and there are many things that I kept thinking, do I forgive an alcoholic
member of my family or two or three, and all the other things. And those are things I just kept thinking, what was the end? And this is a big step. At the very end, when I closed the book, I remember I have 3 sons who don't get along. 2 were born in Africa, actually. And I'm working at forgiving them, and that's very difficult for me because I'm not quite sure where we're coming from and where we're going. So I appreciate reading it, and I thank you for saying something to all of us, because you all had some different things that were extreme. Blessings. Thank you.
That may be a good note to end on, unless somebody else is burning to say something. All right, please come back next week and talk about anti-racism. Thank you.